Right, the send unlock directory. So I have all of my notes on here because I am also neurodivergent. My brain will melt down at some point. I'll forget the point I was going to make, go off on some weird tangent that doesn't relate to this at all. So I just keep it all here. So you will see me referring to it. So the send directory, my baby, as I term it quite often. So in fact, I've done what happens to a lot of women my age. After my own child was diagnosed, as I've learnt more and more and more about neurodivergence, because women and girls have never really been picked up, I've recognised those traits in myself. Nearly all of them, I'll be honest. And the more I discover about him, the more I discover about myself, which I found really, really comforting. Hannah Gadsby put it really well. She's a comedian, if you don't know her. She's very, very funny. And I'm going to paraphrase because she's funny and I'm not. So I'm going to get it really, really wrong. But she basically said, I used to think that I was different because I didn't fit. And actually, now I've realised I don't fit because I'm different. And actually being different is okay. It was the thinking you should be the same as everyone else so that you're not. So it was a really fabulous realisation for me and for Emma, who works with me, who is exactly the same. It's led to some of the work that we're doing here. The boys. The other thing that occurred to me over the past years is that my son should be way ahead of the game because more is understood about neurodiversity now than ever before. So he should be miles ahead of where I was at little. Employers are beginning to see benefits to their organisations for having people who think differently, and opportunities are growing daily. The only place, the most important place, which is really lagging behind, in my opinion, is education. This is my angels. Aren't they gorgeous? In fact, the big one is now in his mid-20s and will kill me for showing this picture. But when the little one started at school, the world exploded. Everyone was coming out to me every day, making complaints about behaviour, about aggression, about attitude. By his third school, because he didn't last in any of them, and not one of them offered SEND support. By his third school, I was really starting to think there are some real issues here. And I didn't know if the issues were him or the teaching staff that he'd had, some of whom I didn't even feel he was safe with. But I engaged with the Senko at the third school, who was brilliant, and who started to say, well, maybe you want to consider assessments. I said, assessments for what? She said, oh, I can't volunteer that, but maybe you ought to consider assessments. So I started researching, and I started researching a lot. And in fact, I found that without diagnosis, there was very, very little available, which was really disappointing because actually a lot of people say that you should be able to get support without diagnosis. I'm hoping, because this was a few years ago, that that's moved on a little bit, and actually some of the schools that we've been working with since then, I think I can honestly say that's moved on quite a lot. I think a lot of schools are still lagging behind on recognising neurodiversity and difference in children, and understanding that the framework they're delivering in doesn't work for that child and isn't going to work for that child. My son actually has so many diagnoses. He has more letters after his name than most professors at Cambridge. In fact, I'm terribly proud. And he's a fascinating, fascinating individual. He's bright, he's very, very clever. He's funny, he's interesting, fascinating, fascinating brain. He's interested in many subjects, but the mainstream framework was crushing him. He was being bullied. He was completely traumatized by the whole experience, actually. So the next step was the research, as I've said, and I spent months digging through all sorts of things, digging through different organisations, digging through the local authority and their processes. I worked in the military charity sector. My job was writing process to deliver services to vulnerable people. And so when I started investigating some of these processes and some of these services, I was kind of blown away. And so many of them didn't make any sense at all. This was my job, and the common sense and the basic flow of a process was just really poor. But I mapped it, and I worked through it, and got my son an EHCP, got him out of school, got him into specialist education, and at the end of it, I was still having nightmares about opening emails that were going to be another barrier, opening emails that were going to say, oh no, not today, sorry. Opening emails that say, well, actually, you've sent this to the wrong team, so we're going to send it over here. And anyone who knows me will know that my emotional responses to most things are pretty even, because I mask really, really effectively. I don't show anything publicly. The thought of crying or showing an emotion in public makes every part of me go, ugh. And I remember leaving work one day and driving out of the office and driving towards my son's school, and he'd got his EHCP. We were heading for where he was going to go to school, and the changes were happening, and I fell apart. I couldn't move. I couldn't carry on driving. I had to stop. And for someone like me to be pushed to that point, that takes a lot. So I started thinking about the things that I had learnt when I went through this process. And I started thinking about how I could use that knowledge. Education needs more common sense and less testing, but I can't do anything about that. I can campaign for it, but I can't do anything about it. Capacity to learn and ability to access learning are two very different things. That is a message that actually, if you've got a platform, you can get it out there. That's something you can change. Organisations are often very defensive of the service delivery because they're permanently under fire. If you're always telling an organisation that everything they do is a fail, of course they're not going to be open and transparent with you. Because why would you? You're just going to get attacked for it. Organisations aren't allowed to make mistakes, and if they do, apologies are rarely accepted. I'm so sorry that we didn't make the right decision on this process. It's not good enough. I'm not accepting that. Barriers, mostly due to poor process in my opinion, but also the sheer numbers of people that they're often dealing with. There's often just a mass. Teachers are overworked, exhausted, and don't know nearly as much as you'd expect about additional needs. But process often requires their opinion anyway, even if they have no specialist training or knowledge about additional needs. They'll listen to the teacher over and above a parent who's been working with it for years. Data collection and mapping across the sector is poor. That adds to the fog around services, and data's my thing, so I can do something about that. Information is fragmented and difficult to access. Months I spent in research. I mean, if you added it all together, probably well over a year, I ended up spending time researching things that my son needed and how to access it. And most importantly, my favourite, the paradox, you have to know the right questions to ask before you can get the advice and support you need. But until you have the advice and support, it's impossible to know what questions you need to ask. Impossible. So, as I said, I decided that actually there were some things I could do something about and some things I couldn't. No organisation can deliver to every need. No organisation can say, right, public sector, I'm going to fix all of those issues. It's not physically possible. But I could do something. Send Unlocked are a charity, and yes, if you'd like to donate, sponsor, get involved, we'd be enormously grateful. But we recognise that there are already thousands and thousands of organisations across the country who deliver support in so many different areas. The issue is finding it. The issue is that research. It's knowing if this organisation is going to be right. It's understanding who this organisation is regulated by, if they are. It's knowing how to find something as important as a hairdresser to cut the hair of your child who won't let anyone touch them. Really basic information that at the moment is months of research. So I created the Send directory. I'm really nervous and really excited because the app is available for the first time for download yesterday. The website opened last year for organisations to start registering themselves. It's free. It's free for users because it's information that's already there. For us to charge you for it would be ridiculous. We're trying to help the people who are the most vulnerable. They're the ones who couldn't pay for it anyway. So it's really important that it's free to the end user. But it's also free for organisations. And it's free for organisations because it's not always going to be them registering themselves. If you don't register yourself, we're going to come and find you anyway. We're going to put you on there. Or users can put you on there so that they can review the service that they've had from you. So it's not chargeable at any part of the service, which is why we had to register as a charity. So from this perspective of organisations, we're looking for all the statutory services. We're looking for charities. There are thousands and thousands of charities working in this sector, some with specific knowledge of specific conditions, some who work in specific areas like education or employment. There are thousands of them. We're looking for the therapists, all the different therapies. I've now spent 6 years trying to find my son a decent occupational therapist. Still haven't got him any. Equipment suppliers. And I'm not just talking wheelchairs and things like that. That's important. But there's also specialist clothing. Clothing that doesn't have any seams in it, or that is designed specifically to go over a specific bit of equipment. There's a million different things. Peer-to-peer support groups, online, in person, doesn't matter. Legal support. Other day-to-day services, as I said, like hairdressers or dentists or people with specific skill sets, entertainment and activities, social things. The other thing we're going to be looking at, which is the most exciting for me, is the next step, is employers and interesting, exciting employment programs, is training and apprenticeships that are happening across the country, and things like alternative education programs. And to give you an example of some of these alternative and far more exciting things, we're speaking to a company who works in the space industry, because you don't have to be over in Texas if you want to get into rockets. We're speaking to an organisation that I've only just found out about this week in the cosmetics industry, who want to do an education programme for children from the age of 11 to learn about the chemistry of the cosmetics industry. And these are just some of the exciting things that employers are working on. We're speaking to organisations who create more accessible qualifications, because a lot of these academic qualifications are just not accessible to children like my son. It's not physically possible. So we're looking at some really interesting and exciting things. And I get really het up about it and I start jumping around because it's so exciting what you can see out there, and the interesting and different opportunities that are growing for these children. But one of the biggest resources for information that I've found on my own journey to access support is other families, is their knowledge, because they're going through all of this process already, or they've been in it for years and they've read a million different books and they've used different tools to support their children in education, and they've done all of these exciting things. And quite often you'll be on Facebook or on Twitter or something, and someone in the thread will say, have you read this book? Have you tried this? Have you done this? So what we wanted to do was create a place where families could bring their information too, because they're a massive, massive resource. So what can families do? Families can review the service that an organisation gives them. Bit like Trustpilot, there are very strict rules. No bad language, no naming and shaming people, all of that. And if they do that, they can be flagged to us. There are some controls on language anyway. It won't save your thing if you're really rude. But people can review, because actually if someone says to you, this organisation changed my son's life, or this organisation never answered the phone, it can be a useful bit of knowledge. They can have their say. They can get involved in some of the projects that we're running, anything that's relevant to them. We run projects inside the process. We might ask, well, actually, we're looking at these projects next, or we're looking at this functionality next. Which do you think would be most interesting to add to the service? Or we might, like we're doing now, be doing a very specific questionnaire about, we're doing one on local authorities at the moment, that's going to go down well. Actually, I hope it really will, because we're looking for the best and the most forward moving across the country. Obviously, we want to know the bad, but we want to know the good experience more. We want to know who is really achieving, so we can start working with them to identify how we can support them much better and how they can share best practice much better. There's a space where you can recommend resources, where you can add interesting and useful things, as I said. There's a place where you can add language. So coming from the military charity sector, I didn't think anyone could out-acronym that lot. And I was so wrong. It's like being dropped into another country without a phrase book and being told to write a fluent legal document. And I said yesterday, I actually spoke to someone once, and I said, you know, who do I speak to about this? And they said, the XYZ coordinator. And I said, what does XYZ stand for? And she said, I don't know, but I know that's who you need to speak to. I was like, okay. Organisations can add things to the glossary, but so can family members. If they see something or they know something that I don't, add it there. Brilliant. Because it'll help me, because I never have a clue what anyone's talking about. But we're also developing at the moment a space where people can add their own stories of accessing support, and actually the other side of that, where they are now, the things that they've achieved. And I want the people at the top who have done amazing things, but I also want the hospital porter. And it was actually kicked off by this amazing girl who I saw on Facebook, and I wish I knew her name and I wish I could find her, because she was incredible. And she had Downs, and she was working in a care home, and she loved making tea and coffee. And she made tea and coffee for all of the residents and all of the staff. That was her job all day, every day. And she chatted to residents as she went round making their tea and coffee. And I would challenge every single person in this room to tell me that you have ever added that much value to people's lives every day, because I know I haven't. And I want to get those stories out there. I want to show the incredible value that is added. We're also, at the moment, sourcing sponsorship for a national calendar for SEND, so that actually people can look for not just activities and social stuff that's happening in their area, but educational courses and whatever's happening. Every organisation will be able to put their calendar on there so that people can search by location and find the things that they're looking for and filter that by what type of thing they're looking for. And then we're going to start our children and young people's programme, and that will be driven by the user. That will be driven by what young people and what families say that the information is that they really need. So as I said, you can download it today. It's new, and for some people, new things are really frightening. Lots of people go, "Ooh!" But I really hope you can embrace it, and I really hope that you can join us, because actually we need everyone to pull together. This is about a collaborative effort to build a resource that can support the whole community. This is not us saying this is what we think you need to know. We've created the platform. It's now for the community to turn it into something exceptional. I really do hope you love it though, because it's 3 years of my life. So I would really appreciate it if you do. You know, if you want to know more, we're upstairs, or you can give us a call, get in touch through the website. And if you have any questions, attack me with it now. No questions? Oh, yes.
Yeah, so obviously it's based around like young people in education.
No.
I was going to say, do we stretch into adulthood, so past the sort of employment opportunities?
Into any age, any organisation and any age. Right. We have on there filters, so your organisation can identify the age groups that you work with. We have on there filters, so you might actually offer, say, therapy support for parents and carers. Because, as I said, even I've got to meltdown stage, and that doesn't happen very often. You know, so maybe you offer support for siblings or other family members. It's not just for the individual with SEND. It's not just for any specific age group. It's for any specific type of support. If you go on there and put yourself on there and think, well, there's nothing here that is relevant to us in the filters, let me know and I'll add it. That's the wonderful thing about it. I can be as flexible as I want to meet the needs of the community. That's what's important. And there's even, as I told my cousin yesterday, because he's the vicar, there's even a space to log if you have any religious affiliations, because that is important to some people. Some people care if they're going to a Christian or a Muslim or a Buddhist facility. You know, I don't, but it's important to a lot of people as to whether or not that's going to meet their needs. And so you can literally put on there anything. And the beautiful thing about it is it's completely diverse. It is for everybody. I don't know who's looking at the other end. I don't care. There's a button on it so you can translate it into any language to make it more inclusive. There's another button, which Apple seemed to have disappeared from it, so I'm going to get that put back today, where you can change how it looks, so that if you maybe have an issue with all the pink, you can change it to monochrome. If you need anything on it that moves to stop, you can stop everything. We've tried to make it as accessible as possible. But it is for everybody, and I hope that actually it will start supporting those families who struggle to access things which are very difficult due to things like language, because it will make it more accessible to them as well. Yes.
Unfortunately, your story is exactly what mine is going through at the minute.
Right.
My 7-year-old, he's been suspended twice, the second time this week,
Mhm.
and I'm not getting no support from the school.
Yeah.
So something like this, I'm getting bombarded with information and it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And that's why I've come here. I was here all day yesterday and today, and something like this I will take away and input and use, because all the knowledge will probably be on there what I need.
Brilliant. Come up and see us afterwards, and I'll show you how on the site you can set up individual family records on your family record, and so you can save favourites and save things in there specifically for individual family members. So whether it's for you, for your son, for your husband, it doesn't matter. You can save things and organise things so that it's all in one place, and I'll give you a few pointers of how I got through the process. Because actually this is a really important thing. It's all about, every single process is about data. Every single process is about data. They're not looking at the individual, they're looking at the paperwork. They're not looking at your son in school, they're not seeing the human, they're seeing the data. Which is why it's quite good for someone like me with a spreadsheet who can look at the data and go, well, we need to organise that. Actually, you need to create a diary of every single day of your son's life, of every single behaviour you see, every single trigger, because how long something lasts, what the result is, how you got out of it, all of those types of things, because that is your record, your evidence of need. School will do that anyway, because they have to keep all of those records anyway, but you need your evidence and your records of need as well.
I started his EHCP at the age of 5,
Mm.
and then COVID hit,
Yeah.
and they haven't even started it again.
Mm.
So it's 2 years down.
Well, come upstairs and I'll give you a few pointers, because I'm quite good on the data. Anyone else? No? Okay, go into, yes?
Actually, sorry. And there's a couple of terms that you used early doors, organisations and the process,
Yes.
that I wondered if you could clarify.
Yeah, so actually on the Send Unlock directory we have two definitions. One is organisations and one is family. Family is anyone you choose to include in your family group. So when you register, you get a family record, and that can be just for you, or you can add as many users as you want. And they could be another blood relative, or it could be, Emma is family to me. And I'm not going to explain that relationship, but it's very long-winded and weird. And most people go, oh, that's a bit weird. But she is a member of my family, and there's no blood relation there at all. I don't care who you choose to include in your family. I don't care if it's one person or 50. That's up to you. Family is a group of people who are working together to support each other, as far as we're concerned. From the perspective of organisation, it's any group or service delivery provider. So it could be a peer-to-peer support group, it could be a charity, it could be an equipment supplier, a private organisation, it could be a government organisation. It's how we classify the group leadership and the provider compared to the family.
But in the slide where you said that organisations can be very defensive,
Yes.
and I wasn't sure who you meant by those people.
Any organisation, any service provider. You could be talking about local authorities or schools. You could be talking about, I've worked with some charities who can be very, very defensive because they've had this barrage of stuff, or because they're frightened of language. These days, language has become a very sensitive area, and sometimes they're just frightened of saying the wrong thing, or terminology that they're using not fitting something because they've missed a change in language that has moved forward a step before they realised it had happened. People are in a very nervous position at the moment about doing something wrong, saying something wrong, or being found historically to have not delivered perfect service. Because perfect service is what is deemed acceptable. And actually, mistakes and maybe not even capturing the right data, or not capturing, the number of people that you worked with in 2010, and someone says, well, you don't even know who you worked with in 2010. People are very careful now, and that carefulness has created a barrier that people are very frightened to cross, and that impacts transparency, that impacts our ability to look into the past so we can look at how things need to change and be positive for the future. And I think organisations have been very open with us, and we've been really lucky about that, because they recognise we're not there looking to beat them up over what happened in 2010. What we want to know is how that's moved forward and how that's changed and what they've done to improve that. And we take everything from the perspective of we're looking for the positive. We're not looking for anything to beat anyone up about. We're looking for the positive. But I do believe that barrage of negativity is what's created this defensive barrier, which is very hard to get behind. Anyone else? We done? Fantastic. Yay.